Welcome back, historians! Caroline here. In previous lessons, we learned that throughout 1775, in the earliest skirmishes with the Royal Army, the American colonists held their own in conflicts such as Concord, Bunker Hill, and the Siege of Boston. We also learned that the Continental Congress began to act like a national government by raising an army, appointing generals and ambassadors, and making agreements with other countries. And we learned that patriot propaganda, particularly Thomas Paine's Common Sense, made a big impact in that it convinced many colonists to support independence. Today, we'll look at the Continental Congress and, rather than working toward resolving issues with Parliament, how they responded to increased calls for independence from England. Our objectives today are to explain how the Continental Congress declared independence and to list the 4 parts of the Declaration of Independence and summarize the contents of each. Ready, historians? After King George III refused to read the Olive Branch Petition, Thomas Jefferson, in a personal letter, wrote,
"Believe me, dear sir, by the God that made me, I will cease to exist before I yield to a connection on such terms as the British Parliament proposes. And in this, I think I speak the sentiments of America."
Shortly after the news of Common Sense's success, the British Parliament passed the Prohibitory Act, which set up a blockade of all American ports and named all American ships as enemies of the Crown. John Adams joked to the Congress that Parliament had already cut them off and declared independence for them before they had a chance to do it themselves. Where independence had once been an issue that delegates had been afraid to discuss, it now became an open topic. Congress agonized over whether it was the right time to do it, but in May, it finally took action. Richard Henry Lee introduced a resolution stating,
"These united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. That they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is, and ought to be, totally dissolved."
It took almost a month, but Congress eventually adopted the resolution and created a committee of 5 men, including Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, Robert Livingston, and Roger Sherman to draft a Declaration of Independence. Throughout June of 1776, Jefferson wrote a draft that was revised by the committee and submitted to Congress. On July 2nd, they approved the measure to declare independence, and on July 4th, after editing the document, they approved the Declaration of Independence itself. Several copies were made and sent to prominent people, including King George III. Copies also went to France, Spain, and even George Washington. George Washington had the declaration read to his troops, who received it with cheers. The Declaration of Independence has 4 parts: the preamble, natural rights, grievances, and the resolution of independence. The first part is the preamble, which is a fancy word for introduction. It has difficult language, but basically it says,
"Sometimes it is necessary for a people to break up with their government. If that happens, it's the right thing to do to explain why it happened."
The second part is about natural rights. It is a statement of beliefs about what rights citizens of a country should have and what the role of government is. You may already be familiar with its opening sentence, which is worth memorizing. As we listen, identify 3 natural rights guaranteed to citizens.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
You probably got those. Listen for one more.
That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute a new government.
Did you identify all 4 natural rights that Jefferson said people should have? He stated the rights to life, liberty, and to pursue happiness, which many believed was a way of saying acquire property and wealth, and the right to change the government when it doesn't protect the first 3 rights. The Declaration then goes on to say that government shouldn't be changed unless there are serious issues. This is a way of saying,
boy, the British government is really bad. We feel like we've been forced to get rid of our government and create a new one that does what a government is supposed to do.
The third part is a list of grievances or complaints. We'll explore this more in the PDF, but I bet you can already think of some things that they cited as reasons to get rid of their government. Pause the video now and use your guided notes to jot down a few that you know. You may have said that the government passed laws for the colonists without their permission. Or the government passed taxes they didn't agree with. Maybe you said the government prevented them from settling lands that should have been open to them. Or that the government held unfair trials. Maybe you mentioned that the government kept a standing army to watch them, which they said was to protect them, but felt more like a way of keeping them in line. There are lots of things that we've explored as to why the colonies broke free from Great Britain. This part of the Declaration is almost like a review. The last part is the resolution of independence. This is the part where Jefferson writes that because of the issues in the list of complaints, we feel as though we have the right to be free and independent states, and we're willing to stake our lives, our fortunes, and sacred honor on fighting a war to gain freedom. While other parts of the Declaration may be more famous than this ending passage, Jefferson hoped that saying the colonists would rather die than submit to this British government would be a powerful signal to Britain's enemies, France and Spain. He wanted them to think that coming to America's aid would not be intervening in a civil war, but rather creating an alliance with an independent country and fruitful trading partner. The focus of the delegates at the Continental Congress was on breaking away from Great Britain. But the language in the document they adopted created questions about its underlying principles.
What exactly does equality mean? If all men are created equal, what does that mean for the institution of slavery? Are women included in this equality, and will they be given more rights in this new nation? What about indigenous peoples who have long been ignored in the decision-making process regarding the future of North America?
Today, we learned that as independence became more supported by the American people in 1776, Congress felt they had enough backing to declare independence. And they did, drafting a beautifully written statement that included rights and grievances. While this particular document gets a lot of attention, the colonists had been making many of these points for over a decade, like when the Stamp Act Congress told Parliament it did not have the authority to raise taxes without granting colonists representation. The Declaration of Independence happens to be the exciting climax of a conflict that officially marked a transition away from political arguments to all-out war, army against army in the American colonies, which we'll now call states. As we move forward, we'll be focusing on the war. Pay attention to structural advantages and disadvantages for both sides and how international involvement impacted the outcome of the war. And until next time, remember to always be clever.
Hey, hey.